There's a goalkeeper standing in front of Lionel Messi, and this isn't the first time his family has done this. 36 years earlier, in a different World Cup, a different continent, a different Egypt team, a man named Ahmed Shobair stood between the posts against Argentina and refused to be broken. Now his son, Mostafa Shobir, was doing it again, except this time it wasn't a group stage draw. This was the round of 16. This was the defending champions. And this was 11 minutes from being the single greatest upset in the history of Egyptian football. To understand how insane this match actually got, you have to understand that a goalkeeping bloodline was basically trying to finish a story that started before most of these players were even born. So let's get into what actually happened in Atlanta, because by the time the final whistle blew, this wasn't just a football match anymore. It was a family legacy, a refereeing scandal, and a 39-year-old legend's entire career colliding in the same 90 minutes. Start with the father, because none of this makes sense without him. Ahmed Shobair was Egypt's goalkeeper back in 1990, in a World Cup where Egypt hadn't appeared in 56 years and nobody gave them a chance against anyone, let alone Argentina. He became a folk hero for holding the reigning champions to a draw, and, depending on who you ask, for being so relentless about running down the clock that it helped push FIFA toward changing the back pass rule entirely. Egyptian football has never forgotten that name. Coaches still reference him. Commentators still bring him up whenever an Egyptian keeper has a big night. He is, in a lot of ways, the standard every goalkeeper who's ever worn that shirt gets measured against. Now fast forward to 2026, and his son is standing in the same net against the same country. Except this Egypt team wasn't supposed to even be here. This is a nation that had played 7 World Cup matches across 3 tournament appearances before this one and had never won a single knockout game. 0. They'd missed the very first World Cup back in 1930 because they literally missed the boat to Uruguay. Coach Hosam Hassan had promised before the tournament that his team would show up differently this time. They beat New Zealand. They knocked out Australia on penalties. And then they walked into Atlanta with nothing left to lose against the most decorated player alive. 15 minutes in, Egypt were already ahead, a corner headed home to send their bench into chaos. And Argentina, a team that hadn't trailed at halftime of a World Cup match in over a decade, suddenly looked completely lost. Then came the moment that should have fixed everything for Argentina and instead broke their captain in half. A foul in the box. A penalty. Messi stepping up for the moment everyone assumed was coming. And Shobir saved it. Right there, in real time, you could feel the entire tone of the match shift. Messi had just become the first player in World Cup history to miss 2 penalties in the same tournament. And it wasn't a fluke, because for the next hour, Shobir simply refused to be beaten. Point-blank stop. A curling free kick smacking off the post instead of finding the net. A close-range chance somehow kept out. This wasn't one great save. This was a goalkeeper systematically dismantling the belief of the greatest attacking talent of his generation, kick after kick after kick, in front of a stadium that had come expecting to watch him fail. Somewhere in Egypt, Ahmed Shobair was watching his son do to Argentina almost exactly what he'd done himself, 3.5 decades earlier. Except this time, Egypt weren't just surviving. They were winning. Early in the second half, Egypt broke away and doubled their lead, 2-0, and for a few seconds, they were through to a first-ever World Cup quarterfinal. Then VAR intervened, rewound roughly half a minute of play, and wiped it off the board for the lightest possible contact in the build-up. It didn't matter. 8 minutes later, Egypt scored again anyway, for real this time. No review. No reprieve. Atlanta Stadium was in disbelief. The world champions were staring down the barrel of the biggest shock of the tournament, and Shobir, the son finishing his father's story, was 11 minutes away from doing something Ahmed Shobair never quite managed to complete himself. And then Messi did the one thing Shobir couldn't stop. A tactical switch pushed him wide, out of the crowd of Egyptian shirts that had been swarming him all night, and suddenly he had room. In the 79th minute, a cross from that side found Christian Romero's head. 2-1. Game back on. Minutes later, Messi conjured a run that looked like it belonged to a version of him from a decade earlier. And then in the 83rd minute, a loose ball fell to him just inside the box, and there was only ever going to be one outcome, a half volley, perfect technique, and even Shobir, who had denied him all night, couldn't get enough on it. 2 apiece. It was Messi's 21st World Cup goal, extending his own all-time record, and it made him the first player ever to score in 6 consecutive World Cup knockout matches, in the same match where he'd already set the exact opposite kind of record with those missed penalties. The most brilliant and the most flawed version of the same player, in the same 90 minutes. But even then, Shobir wasn't done fighting. Argentina needed one more moment to actually win it, and it arrived in the cruelest way possible for Egypt. Deep into stoppage time, their own talisman lost the ball in a dangerous area, Argentina broke instantly, and Enzo Fernandez headed home the winner. 3-2. A father-son goalkeeping story that had held off the world champions for 90 minutes was finished by a single mistake in the final seconds. Here's why Egypt didn't just lose that night, they felt robbed, and there's a real argument for why. 2 nearly identical incidents inside the penalty area, roughly half an hour apart, were judged by 2 completely different standards. The disallowed goal came from the lightest possible contact in a build-up phase, reviewed and wiped out. Later, when Mohamed Salah went down inside Argentina's box claiming a foul, there was no review at all, because a shove that might warrant a free kick outside the area doesn't automatically clear the higher bar required for a penalty inside it. Same tournament. Same referee's philosophy of letting contact go to keep the game flowing. 2 opposite outcomes on 2 similar fouls. You can explain each decision individually. Explaining them side by side is a lot harder. And then it got personal. At the final whistle, Messi and Hosam Hassan exchanged words nobody has ever fully explained. No audio has ever surfaced, and neither man has clarified exactly what was said. Hassan responded by crossing his arms into FIFA's official anti-racism gesture, directly in Messi's face, earning himself a booking. Moments later, a member of Egypt's staff had to be physically pulled away from Messi after charging toward him, before being shown a red card and escorted off the pitch entirely, one of the strangest scenes you'll see at a World Cup, a member of a coaching staff sprinting at the most decorated footballer alive seconds after one of the great comebacks in the sport's history. Hassan didn't let it go afterward either. He came out swinging in interviews, saying his team had been treated unfairly and openly wondering aloud whether the sport wanted its biggest star to keep going deep into the tournament. His striker backed him publicly, calling the whole thing unjust from the opening whistle. FIFA, asked directly for comment, said nothing at all. That's a serious accusation to throw at a World Cup. And to be fair to Argentina for a second, nobody manufactured that comeback. Nobody handed Christian Romero a header or gave Enzo Fernandez the composure to attack a cross with a nation's expectations sitting on his shoulders. The disallowed goal, harsh as it looked, was technically within the rules. The Sulla incident, by that same rulebook, genuinely wasn't enough for a penalty. And Messi's equalizer was pure technique that no referee gifted him. So both things are true at once, and that's what makes this match so hard to file away cleanly. Argentina were heroic. Egypt were also on the wrong end of a system that applies different standards to nearly identical contact depending on exactly where it happens on the pitch. Egypt didn't lose because of a conspiracy. They lost because they couldn't protect a 2-goal lead for 11 minutes against the world champions, and because 2 coin flip decisions landed against them on the same night. And somewhere in all of that noise, there's still a quieter story that's easy to miss. A goalkeeper who spent 90 minutes trying to finish what his father started against this exact country 36 years earlier, and who came agonizingly close. Ahmed Shobair held Argentina to a draw in 1990 and became a legend for it. His son held off Lionel Messi himself for over 80 minutes in a knockout match and still ended up on a flight home. Sometimes a legacy doesn't need a trophy to matter. Egypt fly home with the best goalkeeping performance of the entire tournament and a burning sense that they deserved more than they got. 11 minutes. That's all that stood between a father-son story finally completing itself and the greatest comeback of this entire World Cup instead. So here's the actual question: was this the greatest comeback in World Cup history, or the most robbed a team has ever been on the biggest stage there is? Tell me where you land in the comments, and if you want more of these World Cup stories broken down properly, get subscribed before the quarterfinals kick off.